So the latest movie, directed by Sean Penn, who's also the lead in the role. It's called Flagday. It's a intimate but heavy-handed family drama about family dysfunction in America's heartland. It stars, alongside Sean, is his daughter Dylan, who plays Jennifer Vogel. Sean is Jonathan Vogel, and they play respectively daughter and father. So that's convenient. And one critic suggests that the director is too old for the role. Anyway, it's based on a memoir, Flim Flam Man, the true story of my father, counterfeit life. 1992. John Vogel is a counterfeiter. He's being hunted by the authorities. Law enforcement agent Regina King tells Jennifer about her father's crimes, and then we go back to 1975, when Jennifer is a young adolescent living happily with her mother and younger brother, aware of her father. She's a lover of Chopin's piano music. Her father's a lover of Chopin's piano music, and he was a hustler who often left the family, and he also had a girlfriend. And then we travel through time. So there we are. We open on June 1992. Law enforcement are getting themselves armed. There's a helicopter and a series of vehicles heading swiftly to a destination. We're then on the street with the law enforcement personnel getting their uniforms together, hats particularly, and of course the rifles ready for action. The daughter is informed by the police that her father has fled when he didn't turn up for an arrangement. The law enforcement officer, I think it's Regina King, shows the daughter a dollar bill and goes at great lengths to explain what a great counterfeit it is, meticulous. Then informs her that he's passed, meaning used 50,000 of them, but has actually counterfeited a stack of at least $2 million. And then we move to the freeway. We see a billboard, advertising. I think it's a sort of cafe, diner, and the camera looks back at a car on the highway that stopped. We hear Jennifer in monologue describing a memory, a good memory of her father. We listen to a sort of folk song, acoustic guitar, and see images of Jennifer as a child with her mother. They are in that vehicle, and it's all sort of rather nostalgic, as it's at the same time we are flashes of her as an adult, so it's a memory as she travels in another vehicle. Jennifer speculates on suicide, the number of ways you can do it, and refers to her father as to if it were to happen to him, it would be spectacular. We then flash back to summer in 1975. It's the middle of the night, the family are sleeping in the car, but Jennifer's not asleep, and her father invites her into the front seat to take over the driving. She's a mixture of sort of excitement and panic. He sets her up on a straight road so he can take a kip, saying that there'll be a bend about an hour further on up the road. That reckless decision is supposed to reflect the type of character that her father was, the type of lifestyle that he adopts. Risky, taking chances, not mundane. The purchase of a farmhouse, overstretching the budget, the impulsiveness of taking that decision, and then the magical feel of the family, father and mother putting in the work to make the place look right. To the sound of Chopin, the story takes another twist. We hear arguments between the parents, and then Jennifer spotting her father leaving with a suitcase in the car. He actually leaves in a taxi, and we see a shot of him looking back at the house, seeing his daughter peering through the darkness as he departs. Jonathan's absences were frequent, always giving vague explanations that they were to do with business ventures, details not explained. This chaos led to mother struggling to pay the bills, not really having any solutions, work being difficult to find. We witness the children, Jennifer and her brother, watching cartoons on TV, and her mother slowly getting more and more intoxicated. Her father rang frequently and spoke to Jennifer whilst her mother was sleeping off another dose of alcohol. These calls were always fun, pleasurable, hearing the sound of her father's voice. Tense scene where Jennifer and her brother tell her mother they're going to live with her father. It's certainly charged, emotionally charged. Jonathan, complete with new young nymph, takes the two children on. A neighbour who knows the mother is pretty scolding of Jonathan's desertion of his fatherly responsibilities to the family, whilst waiting for the state to pepperonied. There's a debate about what music to listen to. Chopin, Jonathan's preference, his girlfriend, Bob Seger. As if the kids are really that bothered. Although Jennifer does point out she likes the yellow. So they all end up dancing to Night Moves. Great song. An array of home movies with everyone having lots of fun. Swimming, jumping in the sea, etc., etc. Jennifer comes across a bunch of bikers who are having some serious talk with Jonathan about something or other. Accidents for Nick and father, and then we follow them in the car as they're being returned to the mother, I assume. Bank foreclosure on the farm, mother and kids and possessions in a station wagon. An uncle has some rather ragged sort of accommodation for them. Uncle Buck is played by Josh Brolin. I thought I recognised him. And the mother, Patty Vogel, that's Catherine Winnock. A wife now with an older woman, possibly the mother. The mother slagging Jonathan off. It's all because he was born on Flagday. Such is the ignorance of these folk. We witness Jonathan setting place ablaze. The arson it apparently evolved as a way of getting insurance on businesses that he set up. This was his escape route when things got a little hot under the collar. So we're now with what's her name at college, and she's tucking into the disco and smokes, and there's a hint that she's probably dabbling. Jennifer is lodging whilst at college with this family, but the husband has taken a shine to her, and he creeps into her room, and there's an incident, and his wife appears. Jennifer's in tears and clearly not wanting to accommodate his amorous feelings towards her. She certainly looks hot. She's not lodging, she's with her mother, and the guy that came onto her is the new boyfriend or something. She's smoking crack cocaine, I think, and she's seen at breakfast getting a hit together, and mother goes ballistic. Jennifer gets ready to leave. There's a huge argument all about her father. Her mother spends minute after minute after minute trying to blame the father by trying to create an image of the father as some degenerate, no good liar. Jennifer has come to the end of the tether. Graham Bluss sleeping against the next passenger, then getting some PVC to protect her from the rain in the city. We see her in the laundrette washing her clothes and changing her clothes, walking the streets. She's homeless, of course. Jennifer tracks down her father. We find her at a diner eating, and he delivers his bullshit about being an entrepreneur and having a number of businesses at his disposal. It's all vague bullshit. Penn's character Jonathan is clearly a bit of a sort of con artist, but the acting is just so good. You know, bear in mind the scenes that he's with his real life daughter, they're playing father and daughter, but he's just such a talent. Jennifer's helping her father to present himself at work, and he's got a CV as she cuts his hair, tries to make him look younger, but it's a great little scene. Later, Jonathan returns and tells his daughter he's got this executive position. It's clear that it's probably bullshit. Reference to Flagday and childhood, where it was a very important day that father wished to share with his kids. That sort of, I assume it's Independence Day, that sort of patriotic shit. And then fast forward and we've got him struggling again to cope with the fact that he's not getting any respect. Particularly harrowing scene where Jonathan's now in prison awaiting court hearing, and his daughter confronts him through the glass pane about his deceit and lies, and he gets into I've had a lot of problems mould seeking out a sorry from his daughter, and she's not buying, and it ends up with disaster. Interesting, there's nothing in this movie about her so-called career into journalism, and no detail about his crime other than the fact that he's guilty of them. And we now learn that initial sentence of 15 years. So she takes off, thumbing for travel, then meets a crowd clearly into dope, spends quite a bit of time getting high, doing outlandish things that's like skinny dipping. Her life appears to be tumbling into more and more problems, emotionally a mess, following in Farmer's footsteps to an extent, close to the edge. And then she turns to her mother. Maybe she can reconcile that disaster. Short stay with her mother. Warm feelings for a time, but she knows it's not permanent, so she soon moves on. We're in the dead of winter, snow everywhere. So, to the personal growth aspect of the story, work preparation for getting into journalism. As Jennifer's life turns a corner and she starts to thrive learning about journalism, we get a monologue echoing letter correspondence from her father, who's locked up, wishing her all the best. Spring '92, Jennifer's graduated, and her father's letter again in monologue, expressing regret at not having been there.
Dad, I didn't know you were getting out.
Her father turns up outside the building where she's now currently working, newspaper journalist. Shell shock. They go for some food. Jonathan's attempts to reconnect with his daughter clearly isn't having the effect that he thought. She's so sort of reticent and wary because of the leopards won't change their spots, but he leaves the car to go into the halfway house with the message that people will change. Constant calls from her father. She refuses to answer any of them. The die has been cast. Eventually those memories, those childhood memories, eat away inside, and she tries to contact him. No answer, so she goes to this place that he had told her he got some sort of lease on. The reunion is a disaster. He hasn't changed his spots. He's still delivering bullshit and fantasy. And this scene where he's monologuing into a telephone that's not connected is spotted by her. Eddie Marsan turns up as a expert in pesticides or something, and young Jennifer, as the journalist, is onto him. Marsan goes and makes a phone call, and whilst he's doing that, some TV footage of cops chasing a car, and then the picture of her father comes up, and her clearly chasing after him, the forgery issues, and then there's his vehicle overturns, and it looks like he's probably died. Vogel crawls out from the vehicle. He's covered in blood. He's got a gun, and he looks up at the heavens and puts the gun to his head and blows his brains out. Postscript: Jennifer Vogel has worked as a journalist in cities across the US. Currently she lives in Minneapolis with a husband and dog, and she's writing her first novel. And we get a monologue at the end about her father's drive for freedom enabled her to attain freedom. So it's the French Dispatch. It's the 10th film directed by Wes Anderson, also responsible for the screenplay and the story, although he had a free helping hands on that. The cast is an ensemble cast. Benicio del Toro plays Moses Rosenthal, Adrian Brody is Julian Cadazio, Tilda Swinton is J.K.L. Berenson, Francis McDormand, Lucinda Crements, Timothy Chalamet is Zeffirelli, Jeffrey Wright plays Roebuck Wright, Bill Murray is Arthur Howitzer Jr., Owen Wilson, Herb St. Zasarak, Henry Winkler plays Uncle Joe, and any others particularly famous? Going down the cast, Edward Norton chips in as the chauffeur, and William Dafoe at the abacus. Lee Schreiber is the talk show host, and Elizabeth Moss chips in as Aluna, and Angelica Houston is the narrator, and I think that's, well, there's a huge cast, but those are the ones that stand out. You know, the most famous of these people who've got together, and it's a critic described it as feeling like 4 films in one. Enough ideas for at least 6. And best screenings at Cannes. It's set in the 60s, fictional Gallic commune. It feels like a companion piece to the Grand Budapest Hotel, and it's billed as an obituary to a brief travel guide and 3 featured articles. So an obituary, a brief travel guide and 3 feature articles. So these, I would imagine, are the sort of acts, and let's within the first 30 seconds, Wes Anderson, as always, delivers a huge amount of information, meticulously detailed sets, which you could spend almost 10 minutes on each frame digesting it. We've already had a headline about an editor-in-chief having died. We've seen a picture of a room in a newspaper room with all the machinery ready to be worked at, and then we're transferred to France, and we see the building with the French dispatch at the on top of the building, and the scene in the street with atypical French automobiles from the 60s. There's a very old Citroen there, and there's a few people going about their business. There's some there's a dog or so in the street, a vendor, and it's alive. Immediately looking at this building, which is where this business, the French Dispatch, operates from, and it's got so many recognisable sort of mon-en-cool style detail, and the movements within the building. So such a case of now you see me, now you don't, as you sort of go up the stairs. It's really fantastic. We learn of Arthur Horowitz Jr. being relocated to Kansas from France by his father, whereupon he sets up the French Dispatch, and there's just so much detail in this. It's wonderful already. We, through the narration of Angelica Houston, we move to his obituary, and the equipment being included in his coffin as he's buried. And this, of course, is the first act, called the obituary. We then move on to the second act, the cyclist reporter. His rendition of what he saw as pertaining to news. The cameras on the bike which he's riding, and we're following down a sort of rather deserted sort of lane. In this village we have a split screen. On the left is referred to as the past. It's the bricklayer's quarter, and then we see the future. The contrast in the sort of colour, the detail is absolutely amazing. This courtyard with its sort of stone laden floors and an arch, so to speak. And in the future it's got a jazzy sort of neon light, but it's the same sort of building, and the characters in terms of their dress, past versus future. Past is in black and white, of course, and future is in colour, and we contrast the two eras, and it takes us through other parts of the village, contrasting past and future. Even the area where thievery is at hand, the characters look equally untrustworthy but of course it's a different time. The dress is different, but the activities are much the same. So in Wilson, as we go from different quarters to different parts of the city, which recognised different sort of issues, different quadrants. There was a very quick snatch at the vermin and illustrated by rats, cats, and some rather hideous looking sort of it would appear to be worms of some description. And he's now going on to look at the transportation, him being on a bicycle, and contrasting it with the pollution from the internal combustion engine. It's absolutely brilliant. Then we get a brief glimpse of the red light area and how it's sort of rotated, different groups occupying the area at different times of the day. It's really tremendous. We're now on to art and artists. The Concrete Masterpiece by J.K.L. Berenson, who is Tilda Swinton, I guess. A portrait of a painter and a picture. The typeface is absolutely beautifully drawn. In glorious black and white we see Benicio del Toro, and he's got a woman posing nude for his artistic talents to be illustrated. Then there's what appears to be a timeout or the end of the shift, and the nude woman disappears, clothes herself, and looks like she turned into some sort of North Korean sort of police officer, and Del Toro has sort of got himself together and is marched out, almost as if he's now become the victim, she's the tormentor, whereas it started out the opposite. Swinton narrating, describing the sort of impact that Toro has had on the art world in such a way as to create almost an image of sort of an icon, one of the great artists of our time. But he looked really like a scruffy, sort of dirty old man, really. So we then, as part of the story, gather that Moses, that's Del Toro, is incarcerated for a double homicide, and he's in a cell next to one Julian Cadazio, played by Adrian Brody, who's fascinated by a painting that Moses has created. It's really bizarre. There's a bizarre discussion, well, one-sided, regarding the sale of the painting. Moses wants hardly anything, 50 cents or centimes, and he's distracted by the female guard, and Cadazio is not going to play that sort of game, finally offers 250,000 francs. It's a piece of conversation so bizarre, it's immaculate. Returning to the oratory skills of Tilda Swinton, who looks in part almost like a young Margaret Thatcher, especially in her delivery. As far as the sentence, Moses is transferred to another part of the prison, and he's told that he must introduce himself to his fellow inmates in this part of the prison, and the delivery is a sort of a mathematical sort of monologue about how many days he's been there, how many he's got left to do, blah blah blah, It's completely full of craziness. As the camera pans across the faces of these criminals locked up, the detail in the black and white is absolutely tremendous. So whilst inside it, and Moses and the female police officer have a bit of a sexual relationship of sorts. There's this absolutely ridiculous scene where they've just committed a sexual act. Their heads are side by side, but their bodies are facing the opposite way. And she's trying to convince him that she doesn't love him. It's bizarre. We then witness a parole hearing for Moses when he's asked by the 3 judges to sell to them why he should be released after decapitating 2 people, 2 bartenders. He, of course, fails miserably, and even though Brody's character jumps in and tries to encourage them to see the benefits in the light of Moses being this painter of tremendous talents, his application for parole is revoked indefinitely. Simone, the female guard, then became his one and only pose for art, and we see an elaborate collection of poses in the nude for lengthy periods, suggesting that she's quite an athletic type. We then find Moses tied to an electric chair, and he's asking for the power to be switched on because his conditions for work he describes as almost beyond the pale. And Simone comes in to the rescue. As part of her address to this captive audience, Swinton then refers to an attempt by Moses to fuck her after his release. It's just bizarre. Throughout there's this musical score, this sort of solo piano, which creates this sort of eerie, sort of dark craziness. We're still following Moses. Now Cadasco's bringing all the art collectors, the journalists, all those people that have been primed to gather an adulation towards Moses, but in the absence of any new work from him whilst locked up, Gaddafi decided to bring them all in and set a sort of deadline for some completed new work. It's all quite bizarre. We finally get a glimpse of this new work, and Gaddafi is absolutely ecstatic about it, but then it becomes evident that he's painted or sculpted his work on the walls of the prison, so it can't be removed. Confrontation leads to an almost silent movie slapstick Chaplin Groucho Marx scene where Moses is chasing Cadasco and wants his guts. To complete this first vignette, we then have a discussion about costs from the owner to the woman reporter previously a guard in the prison and lover to the said villain, and the claim for expenses taking place at a location that reminded her of the circumstances surrounding her love affair with the guy Del Toro, who was the subject of the first piece in the French Dispatch. It's wonderful. Politics Poetry is the next vignette. Revisions to a Manifesto by Lucinda Clements. That's the piece. In the lead character here is the name escapes me. The one who's in Frances McDormand. She's the poetry and politics correspondent, and she reflects on the debate at the university about free access to the female dorm, and also stars as a student agitator one Timothy Chalamet, who plays Savarelli. This could be interesting. We see a scene where McDormand and Chalamet are in bed, but just chatting, although the implication from a review is that they were lovers, even though McDormand was old enough to be his mother. He's an agitator. She's supposed to be the journalist, the neutral journalist. And then we have a flashback 6 months to a typical sort of scene in a student building, possibly all the residents, where they're having a party. We flash back to sort of compulsory service, I think, some sort of compulsory military conscription period in the shared dorm, all these young virile men. We hear an amusing number of answers to the question what you want to be when you grow up. An array of answers modelling parental personalities, businesses, or ideals. It's all rather funny and amusing as they sit in their bunks. This vignette appears to be sort of mimicking a battle between two generations, youth, children, call it what you will, and their adults, by carrying out a sort of symbolic chess match to fight for the right to be at that stage of independence. And it's cleverly put together, but ultimately quite difficult to follow. Notions of the sort of French sort of historical incidents involving student uprising against society, a sort of symbolism. Next vignette, tastes and smells, in that section of the French Dispatch. The private dining room of the police commissioner by Roebuck Wright. This is the piece in the paper, the written piece. Jeffrey Wright in the lead role as an interview, and he's being subject to Q&A and responds by describing his memory. It's being Not photographic, but typographic, written word memory. This third piece, bizarre depiction of cuisine practiced by the local police force, the legendary chef Nescaffier, and it's going to become a crime narrative with car chases as the commissioner discovers his son being kidnapped. But the script, Anderson's script, talk about human curiosity, compulsive behaviour, thousands of words, curios of life. It's actually quite a record of neurotic insanity, really. It's a pedantic nature of human behaviour, but the detail that he puts into this through this journalism, this bizarre selection of stories to include in this fictional newspaper, is quite remarkable. It's full of wonderful scenes, really. The son, Commissioner's son, is kidnapped. The way it's maps out is clearly sort of ludicrous. It's part of another flashback to Silent Era. He then gets taken to a huge gas balloon and is then part of a bargaining chip regarding and I can't remember what the ransom was or is. The boy is sort of holed up in a closet-like room, and this showgirl, stroke call girl, is looking over him for her bosses, and he shares with her his fear and asks her to sing a lullaby, which she duly obliges. As we move into this Monsieur Cafe, Chef Cafe, the last of the vignettes, what impresses me about Anderson is the fact that he sort of does these sort of little cryptic sort of profiles describing the characters before we meet them, so we have a sort of image of them, whether they be accurate or not is rather immaterial. The fact is, though, we are predisposed before we actually come across them. Images of a police station, images that connect the career, the job, with the skills needed, and in the description, of course, we get a sampling of the menu, the diet that maximises this skill set, which creates another picture of what we're about to contemplate. The reporter, played by Wright, mistakenly arrives at a wrong destination. It's sort of the holding cell for a criminal that one might assume is about to be terminated, as there's a host of gunmen armed just outside the cell, which has been called the chicken coop, very much to associate with the likely interaction between those from a high gentry as they let go of their blunderbusses on chickens as they sort of run for their lives. We then meet the Commissioner's son, and Anderson then uses the opportunity to do a sort of profile of his life thus far. So we get pictures of how he started to learn the trade of his father, fingerprinting, record keeping, etc., etc. It's all very highly detailed. The infamous outlaw criminal played by William Defoe is basically the demands of the kidnappers of the son that he be released. The reporter played by Wright describes in a sort of tactful way, but no less clear way, how the issue of love to the wrong person really creates quite a furore and a heightened activity in police departments. It's this notion of absolutely getting under control any form of homosexual behaviour, but it's tactfully put across by Wright as he ends up in a cell which we now know to be the chicken coop, and so he's familiar with the surroundings. We then get an elaborate piece going through the contents of this menu for cuisine lovers as a means to generate the ability to come up with some plan to track down the kidnappers and rescue his sons. It's all linked to being nutritionally at your best moment, to mentally work out how you're going to tackle the search, the ideas, the strategies. For example, send a guerrilla detachment to block all egress points to the east and north. That comes from the first course. The next course, drill tunnels, circumference 75 millimeters throughout the partition walls of all three adjacent buildings. This is so deep. Such is the craziness of this story. There's a sort of, after a barrage of firing between the two groups, the police and the kidnappers, there's a lull, almost like a time out, and the father requests that a chef be sent in to feed the son, and at the same time will feed all the kidnappers. It's so bizarre to see it carried out. All but one of the captors dies from the poison, as does the chef. And we then get this amazing shift to a sort of animation as the final frames are acted out with regard to the kidnapping of the boy and him being found and saved. There's then this chase as the one who didn't eat has got the boy and is trying to escape, and we get this car chase, which is truly extraordinary. Final part now, of course, remembering that the owner has passed on. At the end note it's described declines and deaths, and the protagonists are in a room with the deceased, and their job is now to write the obituary. And that's the end of the movie. Closing credits. The musical accompaniment has a sort of Sergeant Pepperish feel to it. It's brilliantly put together, graphically tremendous.